I'll just say here, but I can't hear.
Are we good? Can you hear us now, Mike? All right, perfect. That's great. So we will start our meeting today with State Parks and Cultural Resources. Director Glenn, Director Nalen. And so I guess, welcome. And according to our agenda, we're starting with the general agency update.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dave Glenn, Acting Director of Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources. I want to introduce a few folks in the room because you always hear me talk about staff and how important they are. With our mission of improving communities and enriching lives, if we don't have a good bench, if we don't have great staff, we can't achieve our mission. And this is the crew that makes it happen behind the scenes. So if you guys would just raise your hand as I mentioned your name. Forrest Kaminga, he is our Motorized Trails Program Manager. Carly Ann Carruthers, who is our Planning Department Manager. Kevin Rambler, who's the Director of our State Museum. Nick Nalen, who's obviously sitting next to me. Christina Bird, who is our District Manager for this area. Patrick Carrington, who runs the Outdoor Recreation Office. Con Denise, who's in charge of our construction and engineering. And we also have Commissioner Ken McCann here from our State Parks and Cultural Resources Commission. So thank you for attending, Commissioner McCann. I'll start out, Madam Chair, talking a little bit about the Wyoming State Museum. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but I want to say that we passed out a little folder about a Wyoming State Museum in review for all of you to see. We put this together twice a year, about halfway through the year, and then compare it to previous years. So just encourage you to look at it, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Kevin or Sarah. And I want to apologize, Sarah couldn't make it just due to some family matters that came up last night. But we'll try and cover her the best we can. My update's going to be very quick, Madam Chairman. First, I want to talk about a successful plein air in the park that we had. This is kind of a partnership between State Parks and the Wyoming Arts Council. And what we do is people come and sign up and go and paint in the park. People can come and watch. We had a record number of folks that came this year at Kurt Gowdy, 36 folks that came and started painting, and visitors can talk with them, and then they win awards for the best paintings, but they also sell their paintings as well. So it's been very successful for us, and just want to say hats off to the staff at Kurt Gowdy State Park, and also Rachel Clifton, who's the director of our Arts Council moving forward. We also, with our annual pass that we have on the back side of that, the winner of that art project is actually going to be their photo, their printing. The print will be on the back of the annual pass sticker, which is a really neat thing to do. Our reservation contract system is getting very close. We've been working very closely with ETS. We think we've gotten through those hurdles. As you know, we're actually changing reservation companies starting January 1st. We cannot miss that date. We have to be ready to roll on January 1st. So our staff have been working really, really hard. working behind the scenes with the new company, as well as working with ETS. And as of yesterday, we think we have all that ironed out so we can start moving forward. So that's very good news on our end. Quick Hot Springs update. I know Representative Winter is always very interested in the Hot Springs and what is happening. And first, I want to just thank you for all your support, Representative, for Hot Springs and what we're trying to do there. Our concessions and revenue team and field staff have continued to work closely with Hot Springs State Park concessionaires, and we are holding their feet to the fire to ensure compliance with the terms of their contracts. And that is good news for us on our end. There's also been a sales agreement that has been signed and executed for the TP Pool Aquatic Facility. It has not been closed on. We gave them a 30-day extension. We expect that closing to happen sometime before the 1st of November. At the same time, we're completing our RFP that will go out for a brand new hotel, convention center, and aquatic facility. This is very exciting for us. I've been standing in front of you for 2 years saying this is coming. And I can say it again that it's coming, but next time I see you, I hope to say it's here. And the RFP is complete and we're moving forward. Also, as you may be aware, I sit on the shooting range task force for the statewide shooting range. We had a meeting held in Riverton last week. I was blown away by the amount of interest from communities and questions from communities. We had to bring more chairs into the room to have those discussions. It was great to see Madam Chairwoman Newsom there representing her constituents. And where this meeting is left is we're starting to work on an RFP, kind of explaining what we are looking for with a statewide shooting complex, certain number of acres, how many campsites are nearby, how many hotel rooms are within a certain amount of distance, and how it kind of, I envision it as a funnel. And the first RFP that comes through, no communities that apply for that RFP are going to be weeded out. What we're trying to do is get information from them and then help them provide better information moving forward. So that RFP will probably be out in November sometime. We're going to review a draft in October, have it out in November. And I assume that we will probably have 3 or 4 more processes to filter that down as we move forward. Visitation, through August of 2023, we're tracking about 3% up from the previous year, from last year. That's about 109,000 additional guests. As I mentioned earlier, this spring, our spring was very slow, and I think it was just due to the weather and the snow. The last thing I wanted to do was go camping in April while I was plowing snow. An interesting aspect of that is during the summer, we saw actually about a 7 to 10% higher increase in visitation, which is pretty exciting for us. I also just want to kind of put it on your radar. There's a draft bill about the cultural trust that is coming out, and many of you are probably aware of it. It's coming through Capital Finance. And what this does is it takes the Culture Trust, the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, and it takes it out of Plan A and puts it in a longer-term equities. Probably not, it's more of an inflation proof of what they're trying to do. But what it does is it takes a fund out of Pool A, invests in longer-term securities. The advantage of this is a higher percentage of return. The disadvantage is less liquidity. So what they're looking at doing is trying to create a reserve of a 5 to 7 year spend of what we usually do, so you can dip down in those bad years and hit into that reserve. And in the good years, you fill that reserve back up. Once it gets to about 7% or 5%, that number is not determined, it tips back into the corpus. So the question right now is, where does that reserve come from? And they're working through that. And I just wanted to make you all aware of that. We're very excited about that because it shows a lot of, the spend estimate will be 5% of the last 5 years returns. So of the total. So for us, it's very good because we can be consistent and we can look at it and go, we estimate that we will have this amount of money to spend in the coming year. So we're excited about that. I also very briefly wanted to give it a shout out to Kevin Ramler for the Capitals facilities and wayfinding. Kevin has, and Kevin will be speaking here in a minute, but he's worked tirelessly on providing comments and information using his museum experience, capital exhibits, wayfinding committee. He's also been working on the committee, but he's also been heading up this level 1 and level 2 museum study at the same time. And he's also kept the museum up and running smoothly. So I just want to give a shout out to Kevin and thanks for your great work. Something funny about the museum and the Barrett Building that I just thought I would share. I don't know if anybody's read the latest Craig Johnson book, but Walt Longmire comes down and spends some time in the archives in the Barrett Building. And so I randomly got on Facebook and texted Craig Johnson and said, hey, let us give you a little behind the scenes tour. So we have that set up now. Craig Johnson will be coming down and getting a behind the scenes tour of the museum and the archives. Speaking of archives, October is American Archives Month. We have a lot of events planned through our archives office, everything from learning about how to research genealogy, and then they also have a speaker series. If you haven't been involved with those, they're wonderful. There's a couple of them a month, and they'll talk about anything from Tom Horn to Fort Phil Kearny to Medicine Lodge archaeological site. There's one coming up about the 1955 United plane crash. You can watch those online, or you can actually attend them in person. I would encourage you to do it. Lastly, October 27th through the 29th is the Arts Summit in Sheridan. This is through our Arts Council. They do this every other year, and they bring artists, they bring organizers, they bring local communities together to just sit and talk about the future of art and what they can do in Wyoming. So I really encourage you all to attend. And with that, Madam Chairman, I would probably pass it off to Nick to talk about a couple of other issues, and then we'll move on.
Mr. Nalen?
Madam Chairman, Nick Nealon, Deputy Director, State Parks. So I have two items for you. The first is just a brief update on the semi-quincentennial task force. The governor has identified the folks that he'd like to serve on that, and the notifications for that should hopefully be going out next week. And then we can get the task force in place and moving, really start some planning to talk about the events we're going to have over the next 3 years. So that's super exciting. It's been a long time coming. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was at the last meeting, there was a little discussion about the Sutton archaeological site boundary issue. And if I could, I just wanted to read from the Enrolled Act that was passed that focused on Sutton. It says, in addition to state archaeological sites designated in other statutes, the following lands are designated as state archaeological sites, and the department shall by rule specify legal description of the sites. If I had read that more closely, we would not be in this situation because we ended up putting some of the legal description in the actual bill itself. So the bill says the lands in Platte County managed by the department as of July 1, 2023 as Sutton State Archaeological Site, period. And I think if we would have stopped there, we would have been fine. But then there are an additional 5 lines that basically give a very generic legal description of the property, which, as I mentioned last time, we've come to find out is not accurate. Carly Ann Carruthers, who's the head of our planning section, and Conrado Deniz, who's the head of our engineering section, are up here with me in case there are any questions. We've engaged with a consultant to go out and do surveys. They've completed those surveys, and they're very excited about the project. They said it's a much more complex thing than they usually work on. And they told us, in fact, that they were going to submit the results of the survey for an award. In their profession, they were so excited about it. But what it shows is different from what's listed in this document. I would also say that we've presented those results to the adjacent landowner, Mr. Voigt up there, and he wanted some time to take a look at his records to see if there was any additional evidence that he could bring to the table. That said, our surveyors feel pretty confident that they got it right. So I think it would probably be a great idea at some point, if not this year, if we could clean up that language that's in the bill to remove any legal description and then let us put it into rule like we should have in the first place.
So I have a question. What is the statute that we put that under? Can you give me a statutory reference?
36, Madam Chairman, it's 36-8. 1501 C3.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about that? Senator Ellis.
Madam Chair, just a quick comment. we had the legal description in there initially because I think there was going to be some concern, and we did hear it on the Senate side of, is this going to allow state parks to just drive around Wyoming and start designating anything they want as an archaeological site? So the legal description was added as a way to curb those concerns. So I just want to, in your defense, in our defense, there was some rationale behind it. Hopefully, some of those concerns have been quelled. And to the extent that people have concerns about it, this is Romanet 3. This is the third one we've created. So there aren't a whole lot in Wyoming. Just a little more color for that conversation.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Representative Burkhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Nick, thank you for the phone call the other day, because I was the one who raised that issue on what are the exact legals. So thank you for your hard work and everything. And I'm just kind of a nerd about that sort of thing. We need to make sure we know what we own and what others own, and not trample on state land or personal land, private land. So thank you for the hard work. I know that was kind of daunting a little bit.
Madam Chairman, Representative
Mr.
Burkhardt,
Mayor.
I learned a lot. I had no idea that mining claims were so complex, not something I had ever encountered before. And to sit down with, we spent an hour and a half with the surveying crew, and to hear the lengths that they went to and the research and the time in the courthouse and the time going through old documents. And it was really eye-opening for me. So thank you.
We'll have to talk sometime. I'm sorry, Madam Chairman.
Representative.
We'll have to talk sometime about that. That sounds like an interesting endeavor.
Madam Chair, Representative Burkhardt will be happy to share it with you.
So my question is, do we need any action at this point, or we're waiting for the landowner, the adjacent landowner to kind of say, okay?
Well, Madam Chairman, I think whatever we end up putting in the rules, we can do at any point, right? It's do we want to leave this incorrect language in the statute is my question. And following up on what Representative Burkhardt brought up last time, I just, wanted to give you the information and tell you where we were. So I guess that's kind of up to you guys.
I think we do not want to leave incorrect language in the statutes. And so I think that we will maybe direct our staff to just do a very simple bill that just deletes that language. Representative Burkhardt?
Madam Chairman, is that all we need to do, is to delete that language?
Mr. Nalen?
Madam
Because,
Chairman, I think looking at the statute, and I apologize for not having a copy in front of everyone, but looking at the statute, I think if we took out everything except that part I read to you earlier, the lands in Platte County managed by the department as of July 1, 2023, as Sutton State Archaeological Site, and then refer back up to the previous section C, where it talks about specify in rule. So I think if we take that language out about the legal description that follows, and then once we finalize things with the adjacent landowner, then we go back and we put it in our rules, and then we'll be good per statute.
Representative?
Madam Chairman, what I'm getting at is, this is our last meeting of the interim, and I think it would be easy to write a conceptual bill, just deleting language, and I think we could actually vote on that here. But one that would take more extensive work and more extensive language, we may have to run that as an individual bill, or run it and then have a quick video conference to vote on it.
So what I'm hearing you say is today we would do a conceptual bill as a committee
Yes, Madam Chair.
to just delete that language.
To
And
delete
then-
that language with, Madam Chairman, with everyone understanding exactly what we're deleting.
And then as we would move that bill forward, we would hone in on exactly what needs to happen. Is that
Yes.
what I'm hearing from you? Okay. Any other comments from the committee? Staff? Lucas, is that reasonable?
Madam Chair, yes, thank you. I do think, within these statutes, the subparagraph 1 is as the land in Hot Springs County managed by the department, known as Legend Rock State Archaeological Site. That language is already in the first sentence of the one that designates Sutton. And so, if you were to just remove that other language, it just would be removing that specific site description. But just as Mr. Nalen has said, they have the authority to define the boundary by rule. So I think that would work.
Okay, great. So maybe let's pause here and get a feeling of the committee. Are we good with that conceptual bill? Representative Burkhart.
Madam Chair, I would move that conceptual bill to delete that language.
So moved by Representative Burkhart, seconded by Senator Baldwin to delete that language and create a bill that does that. Senator Ellis.
Just some discussion, Madam Chair. I think, just a note of caution, usually when we have bill drafts that we vote on, it's good practice to have those uploaded on our website so the public can take a look. I do think this is a bit of an exception because it's a cleanup bill. We can't legislate our ownership over lands or management over lands where we don't have that authority. So to me, this really is a cleanup. So I just want to caution members that this is an exception, not something we should generally do, but I can see why it makes sense for today.
I hear that, that this is not common practice.
Madam Chairman?
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you. Could we have staff read for us the rest of that, of what would be deleted, so that everyone on the committee understands this? Because we don't have anything in front of us that shows this bill.
Lucas.
Madam Chair, Representative Burkhart, yes, thank you. And I can even, I'll send the language to the committee here shortly. So I'll just try and go through this very briefly. So yeah, it is in Wyoming Statute 36.8.1501. This is where, state park designations and historic sites, archaeological sites, and recreation areas are designated. And so this is specifically found in subsection C, which states, in addition to state archaeological sites designated in other statutes, the following lands are designated as state archaeological sites, and the department shall by rule specify the legal description of the sites. In paragraph 3, it states the lands in Platte County managed by the department as of July 1st, 2023 as Sutton State Archaeological Site. And that's kind of the language that would remain. The language I believe that would be removed is, the site shall consist of the following real property of 46 and 382 thousandths, 46.382 acres in Section 6, Township 27, Range 65, Mineral Survey Number 196, patented claims, Molly Gibson, Crown in 1901. So it's that second sentence.
So Lucas, could you send that out to the committee? And I think what we will do is we will all get that by email, and then right after lunch, we will take this up, if that's acceptable to the committee.
Madam Chair, I just sent it too.
Madam Chair, then at this point, I would withdraw my motion if that's acceptable to
Okay.
the second.
Okay, motion withdrawn and seconded withdrawn. So we will take this up right after lunch, and then we will all have that hard copy in front of us. All right, carry on. Mr. Nayland, what else do we have?
Madam Chairman, that's all I had regarding the Sutton parcel.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
moving on.
that is it for the agency update from
Okay.
State Parks and Cultural Resources, unless there's any other questions.
Any other questions about the update?
Madam Chair?
Oh, Senator Grew, forgot you were there.
Yes, sorry about that. Easily forgotten. I know I was on a need-to-know basis earlier in the meeting, but I did get the audio, so I've heard a couple things. So I wanted to ask Acting Director Glenn, first, good morning. Second, on the shooting range, and I was very glad to hear that you say you're not going to weed anyone out of this first round of selections. I just wanted to make sure that one of the reasons you're not weeding out is, I know you called for campgrounds and a certain amount of hotel rooms that necessarily won't X anyone out because they may be a little short on that, because actually I would think as you build this facility in the first couple of years, as it builds up in popularity and customer base and whatever, that actually let the private sector kind of come to that as far as building what's needed to be built around it. So not to necessarily, not look at communities that maybe have a little less infrastructure than have more. I would hope that you would do that. And I think that's what I gleaned from you saying that you're not going to X anyone out. Wouldn't you agree?
Sure.
Madam Chairman, Senator Grew, good morning to you too as well. Yes, you're dead on. I think, it's all, to me, the way I look at it, it's almost like an RFI, a request for information. One of the things that has been difficult for us is to communicate the needs of a big shooting complex. When you talk to folks in Thermopolis, they go, we've got the site, it's beautiful, we've got a shooting range there now. And we have to educate them that we need 800 minimum acres and preferably over 2,600 acres. We want topography. We don't want to be shooting straight across flat sagebrush or grasslands. We want canyons. We want great conifers. We want aspen. We want, those types of things. So this is, I think, just us providing a lot of information, what is needed. Communities then coming to us going, this is what we have, and then us helping them work to put together a better strategy and a good plan moving forward. The one thing that we have not done yet, and we will be doing this in November as the Shooting Range Task Force, is how do you rank that criteria? Do you have to be so close to an airport? Do you have to be so close to a highway? Do you have to have so many hotel rooms? Do you have to have so many campsites? We have not gotten to that stage yet, and we'll be doing that, in the meeting in November, hopefully to kind of work through those processes and try and make them as objective as possible as we're moving through that. Does that answer your question there, Senator Drew?
Yes, it does, Dave, and thank you. I do have one follow-up on another matter, if that's okay, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you. On the cultural trust, I've been getting letters. I'm on Captain, and I've been getting notes about a specific amount of money, and I'm looking through to see, I had a couple emails about it. Something about $2.3 million. Does one kind of beget the other? Is that why I'm getting letters from people in the arts community looking for a specific amount of money? Is that what that difference that you're looking for in that trust fund, or am I on another page?
Interim Director.
Madam Chairman, Senator Drew, I am not aware of what you were talking about. So
Okay.
if you look at roughly $30 million in the cultural trust right now, just under 30 million, if you're looking at about a 5%, actually it'd be substantially more than that we'd be looking for. So I do not know the answer to that, sir.
Okay, I think I understand where they're coming from. Okay, thank you. I think I got where you're going. Okay,
Any other questions?
for me, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Representative Andrew.
Thank you.
Byron.
I just, as a freshman on TRW and going around the state, our wonderful tour in Evanston, our wonderful tour yesterday, just hats off to Acting Director Glenn and his staff for how great it's been. We have very large state, the state parks and their staff has a very large state to cover, and it's been fun. In my travels across the state, being able to stay at state park campgrounds during committee work, and just kudos to you guys and tip of a hat.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions? Wouldn't you agree, maybe?
I thought about that, but I'm not sure I wanted to put the acting director in a wouldn't you agree in that situation. So wouldn't you agree?
Madam Chairman, I agree.
Okay, good. We're on the same page. So then I guess we will move on to the State Museum update. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members, Kevin Ramler, State Museum Director. Just wanted to provide a brief update to the State Museum Level 1, Level 2 study that we talked about at the June meeting. That study was completed in late June and delivered, I believe, to the committee in July. Since then, we've also gone before JAC and SBC to talk about this project. In the SBC July meeting, there was a recommendation from State Construction to move forward with design build on the museum project. SBC did not take action on that recommendation. However, they did direct the State Construction Department to utilize existing funds to kind of do a supplemental study on the old Safeway lot here by the Capitol to investigate what a building might look like on that site, so we can make better decisions, make sure we've looked at all the available properties in the Capitol complex for this potential museum building. Since then, we've really been digging into the economics and the business model side of the project. So just a few numbers that have come out of that. So right now, the State Museum's annual cost, about 10% of that is covered by self-generated revenue, so grants, donations, concessions. The other 90% is general funds. If you look at the study and the business plan or the pro forma that's included in that, under that model, if we were to adopt it, that moves up to about 35% of the museum's costs are now covered by self-generated funds rather than the general funds. So in addition to that, savings for the state coffers, we've just recently started talks with the Center for Business and Economic Analysis at UW, try to get a small economic impact study done, try to understand not just how it works internally for the business model, but also the impact currently of the museum operations for this community, and then also what the impact would be should this expansion go forward. So I'm excited to get those numbers back, and we'll of course share them with you all once we have them. Beyond that, I know it came up at the JAC meeting that Representative Nicholas has asked the LSO to start some research and potentially drafting a bill that would set up a mechanism to accept private funding, private donations, and probably actively seek those kinds of funding and donations for this project. So we'll be working along with them, providing any help and input that they need to set that up or to prepare that language. That's kind of where the study's at. We continue to work on it, kind of do this groundwork. We have this design, this conceptual, this program, and we'll continue to move forward with it. So that's kind of the update. I'm happy to answer any questions if you've had time to look at the study, and yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee? Co-Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. Kevin, I've never caught your last name, so.
Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair, Ramler, R-A-M-L-E-R.
Okay, Rambler. I wanted to call you Kevin, but I probably should call you Mr. Rambler. But anyway, I noticed that your visits are up. It seems like we're bouncing back really good from COVID, the COVID years. And I just wondered, in terms of your fundraising, how do you propose to maybe get involved with more folks, not only on the site, but just with fundraising in general?
Mr. Ramler?
Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair. Yeah, I think that the goal ultimately, and this has been a goal for quite some time, is to set up a foundation with a professional staff. And, this is obviously most nonprofit museums have been doing this for decades. But even at the state level, I know Montana, we've talked about their project that's supposed to be completed next year. And I've talked to my colleagues at the Idaho State Museum. Both of those institutions have professional fundraisers on staff that are able to go out. They're able to build those connections and do that. So I think that is ultimately the avenue to pursue if we want to go after larger private funding. We do accept donations at the door, but that's not a huge. It's not going to build a building.
Follow-up. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Have you noticed any problems with accommodating folks from other counties? I've noticed that the visits are concentrated in Laramie County, so what can we do to facilitate friendlier conditions for those folks?
Mr. Ramler?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Representative, I think it's a great question. It's something that we think a lot about is, we are the state museum, but of course, with our location, our Wyoming visitation tends to be focused pretty heavily in the Laramie County community. A couple things that we've been trying to do to increase that impact for the other counties in the state is not necessarily getting those folks to come to Cheyenne, although some of them do. And we definitely have school groups that are coming from all over the state to visit the museum. But we really want to take our resources and push them out into the other communities. So one of the projects I've kind of been working on is going around and visiting the county museums, having conversations with their staff, seeing how we can best support them. We do have a traveling exhibits program that's free for any museum or library or community college in the state. They can borrow those exhibits and put them up. So that's another way that we can impact those citizens all around the state that aren't necessarily reflected in that document in a really clear way. I mean, I think we do have the traveling exhibits numbers in the document we shared with you, but it's not broken down by county. But most of that's going to be happening in other counties. The other piece there, if you look at some of those education numbers, is we really do have great educational impact all around the state. So our curator of education does virtual field trips, sends out trunks with artifacts that any teacher around the state can rent. We'll send it to them. They just got to send it back to us when they're done. It has artifacts that they can pull out and use in the classroom, and then they get on a Zoom or a Google Meet call with our curator, and he does a program with them so they can kind of have a piece of the museum in the classroom and then have a staff member kind of virtually there to provide that. So those are some of the ways that we can impact those other communities around the state. And I'd also just draw attention to in the pro forma, right now our budget that allows us to go do that kind of outreach is really a couple $1,000s. And if we were to activate on all these, the revenue options that are outlined in the study, that goes from maybe, $2,000 a year to $150,000 a year that is dedicated exclusively to supporting statewide programs. So that could be really revamping the traveling exhibits programs, taking some of the costs that museums currently have to do to get those exhibits to their institution, absorbing those in that funding. It could even look like grants to other museums. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay, any other questions from the committee? Representative Angeles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for you. So how many teachers, do you have an idea of how many teachers or schools are taking advantage of the trunk and doing that? That sounds amazing.
Mr. Ramley?
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I can definitely follow up with those numbers, how many people are using the trunks and those other programs around the state. Some of that information will be in that annual report that we shared as well, but I'll follow up specifically with that.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another question, are the teachers responsible for paying to get it back to you? I understand you get that to them, but they need to ship it back or maybe drive it back. I'm sure that happens too.
Mr. Ramley?
Madam Chair, Representatives, yes, that is the current arrangement. We used to be able to afford to ship it both ways, but recently we've had to ask them to ship it back, or as you say, many of them do drive it back.
Anything else? No? Okay. Other questions?
Madam Chairman, if I
yes.
could add something on the level 1 and level 2 study. One of the things that's been very interesting to me is you talk to any legislator or any individual and they have an idea where they want to put that museum. One of the things that I think we need to do potentially is to walk before we can run and potentially put together, I know there's a task force working on the Capitol complex. Are they going to close 24th Street? Is there going to be a mall? Those types of questions, I think, we need to have those answered probably before we determine where that museum is going to go, which will help us with design and other things. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I know they're working on it, but we're excited to see that plan because then it will help us put something together.
So Director Glenn, is it your thought that there is already a task force working on the Capitol complex, and is there a sub-task force working on the museum specifically?
Madam Chairman, I don't know the exact answer to that. Kevin, you may with the capital wayfinding discussions.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there is a subcommittee of the State Building Commission working on capital area master plan. There's not a group working specifically on the museum. However, of course, that group is well versed with this study and what we've been doing with the level 1, level 2 at the museum, and are thinking about how that fits into the capital area master plan that they're developing.
Okay. So is it your thought that the planning process is being covered adequately at this point through the Capitol complex group?
Madam Chair, yes, I believe between the groundwork that's been laid in this study that we did this year and the work of that committee, I think that we are well positioned to be able to carry out a good plan that works for the whole complex.
All right. Any other questions about the museum? All right. Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Then we'll move on to the Arboretum. First, I want to thank you for that awesome tour yesterday. And it was remarkable to see that. I had never had any idea that even existed. I think those of you maybe in Cheyenne had an idea, but I did not know. And so as we go forward with this, kind of the bigger picture is this particular bill doesn't seem to hit the mark that we're looking at right now. So we would like to hear about the Arboretum and about your planning process and how that's going. And then I believe we will set up a working group to hone in bill form on what we need to do to continue the planning. I know this is a long process, and the financing piece is important. And so I think that we will just hear about your thoughts and your plans and what you want that to look like, and then we'll assign a working group. So, Mr. Nalen.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Apologies for stepping out. I was bringing Mayor Collins up to speed on what's happening today. So we were approached back in March with the idea of taking over the High Plains Arboretum as a state historic site. And with me today at the table, again, we have Carly Ann Carruthers, who's the head of our planning section, Conrado Denise, who is the head of our construction and engineering section, and Christina Bird at the end, who is our district manager for the area where the Arboretum is located. And so we're going to take a step back from where we were at the last meeting, if that's all right with you, and just kind of talk to you about the history of the Arboretum initially, why the Arboretum is important statewide, and how what our involvement has looked like to date.
So we all have your handout, as well as this document as well.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much, and we can talk about those as we go through the process, if that's okay.
Yeah, so please carry on, Mr.
right.
Nalen.
I'm going to ask Carly Ann if she could start talking a little bit about the history of the site and why it's important statewide.
Ms. Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carly Ann Carruthers, head of the planning section with State Parks. I'm going to try and, as quickly as possible, give you guys the rundown of what's more than 100 layers of very deep and layered history of the Arboretum and the larger USDA research station. So that property is located on city land, City of Cheyenne land, west of F.E. Warren Air Force Base off of Happy Jack and Round Top Road. The initial USDA research station was founded in 1928. They had a 199-year lease with the City of Cheyenne. The mission of that changed in 1974 to be what it currently is, which is a grasslands research station, but it is still actively in use. And in the early 2000s, the City of Cheyenne took back some of the core portions of that original 1928 research station and have been operating that as the High Plains Arboretum. So that gives you sort of some explanation of the long title of this state historic site that shows up in the draft bill. So as Mr. Nealon said, the mayor approached us earlier this year, which when anyone comes to state parks and asks us to take on a site, whether it's park, historic site, archaeological site, and that kicks off our site criteria process, which is written in rule per statute to say that we need to evaluate those properties and how they would ultimately affect the entire system before we either acquire or dispose of property. So that involves gathering a lot of data, doing an evaluation of the site, everything from visitation to amenities, assets, issues that the current landowner is having. Why are they coming to us? That's pretty important to know. So we've been working with a lot of partners on this project to gather all of that data. Ultimately, we take an evaluation team out, and we're lucky to have people who had worked and lived on the site, at least a representative from each of our partners, which include the City of Cheyenne, the USDA, local horticultural groups. Christina will talk more about just how expansive this partnership network is. So when they went out to the property, they saw something similar to what you guys have in that brief. Lots of details about the property and then actually a chance to go out there and see it. It really has been surprising of how many people even here in Cheyenne don't know about the property. So yeah, we were happy to have Representative Singh join us and have a pretty balanced approach there, I hope. So that comes back, we ask everyone who goes on that evaluation team tour to score the property, and the Arboretum has come in at the top level of our moderate priority. And so I think that helps us recognize that there will certainly be challenges to this site, but that ultimately the history of this is very deep and it fits in well with the State Parks and Cultural Resources mission. So that sort of brings us here today about process. So then I want to set you guys up just to have a history of the site and everything that does exist out there that would potentially come under the State Parks purview for management. So some of the earliest history out there is on top of the Round Top Hill. So it's one of the higher points out there. And all of the city of Cheyenne's water development history is sort of located and really concentrated on top of that hill. So Cheyenne had one of the earlier water treatment systems in the Rocky Mountain region, so really set the precedent for how people got clean water and effective irrigation and drinking and all of the things that we kind of get every day without thinking about. So that's a really neat opportunity to investigate that on top of Round Top. And then if you come down into the larger site, there's a rich horticultural history with that USDA research station. So that was always a very well-developed property. They were not just doing minor research out there. It was a fully staffed site. All of the buildings on the site were designed by architect William Du Bois, who has designed a number of other facilities here in Cheyenne on the University of Wyoming campus and beyond. And those are still on site being managed right now by the USDA and the city of Cheyenne. But I think that shows the scale of the intense agricultural research that was happening out there from 1928 to 1974, and then of course from 1974 to now with a more agricultural grasslands research focus. Just to give you a sense of what they were doing out there, they were testing and cultivating native plants to see what they could do to improve how those plants survived in Cheyenne as a difficult climate. They were doing a lot of crop research, forage assessments, and introducing and testing species, not just from around this area, but from around the region and the nation, and even beyond these international species being brought back for testing. So when you, again, think about the level of impact that this site has had for our state and beyond, it's pretty incredible. The impact is also difficult to understate when it comes to ranching history in this area. There was a lot of shelter belt plantings and research that were coming out of that station. And so there are station records where you can go in and see which ranches in Wyoming were actually able to get tree seedlings and advice from the station staff to go out and have those shelter belts planted along their ranches. So all I can say to that is thank goodness in our windy climate. So there is also ongoing research and potential with all of the plant species that are out there. I think we've heard a lot about how there's essentially like a genetic pool for plants and trees out there that we know work well in the state of Wyoming and that could then be propagated beyond. And that has broad implications for the university research. We heard a little bit yesterday about partnerships between the University of Wyoming, LCCC, our conservation districts, and then beyond. Especially the USDA research station has a lot of connections to Colorado State University as well. So again, getting back into that regional impact. The third layer of history that is really present at the property is the Civilian Conservation Corps. So the Civilian Conservation Corps, and actually even one of the works projects administration programs that was prior to the CCC being official, all worked on the site. So there was a veterans crew, a junior crew, and one of the state crews, ironically, was even named State Parks Crew. So part of the development at that site was actually the Round Top State Park, which never came to full fruition, but that is the reservoir and what is now known as Camp Carefree and managed by the Girl Scouts that is up there on Round Top Hill near those water resources. So with that very layered history, that is really what led us to draw the boundary that you see in the map that we've presented in that brief today. For state parks, the boundary is very important for us to draw. We, by statute, cannot spend state parks money off of land that state parks owns or manages. And so when we drew this boundary, we wanted to be very conscientious that we want to be able to help with fencing, access roads, partner management, and all of those key pieces of a site that really help us manage visitors and make sure that there's both natural and cultural resource protection happening. So that boundary is especially towards the south, there's a lot of land that is still in use by the city of Cheyenne and for the USDA for agricultural research purposes, but we want to make sure that we can at least help with the corner of the fence, and also so that we encapsulate the entire, what we call the cultural landscape that we've talked about. So capturing the water history, the CCC resources, and then this immense agricultural research. The other thing that our site criteria process led us to investigate, I think when people from the city of Cheyenne first came to us asking for assistance, we were talking a lot about managing this as a state park. And through this evaluation and learning so much about the history, we have actually switched the definition to evaluating this as a state historic site. And that was mostly to capture, it does not exclude recreation opportunities from that site by any means, but it puts the focus back on the history out there. I think most of you saw this yesterday, so you can probably recognize that it would not be appropriate to say have RV sites parked under these historic trees, or some of the other things that people think about, like an extensive mountain biking trail system or something, for instance. So by putting that state historic site moniker on there, you can kind of guide people's vision in that direction and get them to understand where we're coming from. But I think Christina will talk more about the vision for management and partnerships and how recreation and other opportunities would fit into that. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you elaborate more on the differences between a historic site and a state park? Thank you.
Nick, are you taking it?
Madam Chairman, Representative Singh, I think to build on what Carly Ann talked about, historic sites, parks tend to be places where people go to camp, where we have biking trails, we have hiking trails. People come and spend multiple days often. It's more of a recreational type site, right? So historic sites are our effort to help contribute to saving the history and culture of Wyoming, preserving those by preserving these sites. And they serve much more of an educational role in our system. We're bringing people out there to let them enjoy the scenery, let them enjoy the place, for sure. But we also want to teach them about why it's important to Wyoming history and why it's important to them.
Follow up? Is that, okay, thank you. All right, are we moving on?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, if I could, I just want to say that the site criteria process that Carly Ann has talked about and is something that she led and has done a remarkable job putting together in a very short time. The process that we've completed for a project of this size and scope would normally take us 2 or 3 times as long to complete. We've tried to work to have something ready for the legislature this year. In that very brief time frame, Carly has done a remarkable job. So I just want to congratulate her and thank her for that. Christina Bird will talk to you about the handout that's in front of you and a little bit about the operational vision for the site.
Great, thank you. Ms. Bird.
Madam Chair, Committee, good morning. Christina Bird, Laramie District Manager, Southeast area of Wyoming. All of our parks and historic sites have a certain complexity, as you know, and this one would really be no different in the operations. We envision that we would end up managing 877 acres, which would require us to have groomed property, which currently the city is doing the best that they possibly can out there. We would end up managing MOUs and partnerships with upwards of 13 partners, many of whom are in the audience with us today. That includes the City of Cheyenne, the Board of Public Utilities, State Forestry, the Girl Scouts of Montana and Wyoming. We would end up managing 14 historic structures, and that's both management of those historic structures as well as the preservation of those historic structures, which you all saw yesterday and got an opportunity to wander through. This also includes visitor services because obviously as a state historic site, we would want people to come and enjoy our historic sites. And so visitor services obviously includes school tours, it includes events, it includes weddings, it includes memorials from the Veteran Cemetery. And so giving people the opportunity to utilize that historic site, both in an educational capacity, also in an opportunity to come just enjoy what the historic site has to offer. That would also include day use areas. Ultimately, the vision of this park would be to have that round top area where you were yesterday in the water filtration sites turned into a day use area because, as you remember, the view from that area is astounding. And we do believe that people would enjoy going out there and using it for daytime use, going out to picnic, going out to enjoy walking trails, really going out with their families to use it as a family location and as a site. Our partners, while they would manage the working areas, we still hold that position of having to maintain those historic structures so that our partners can do the things that they've been talking about. And our partners have been talking about things like growing trees for statewide use, growing trees for citywide use, we've bandied about growing annuals for that use as well. And so the operations of this particular site are as complex as some of our other ones. We would really prefer to have 3 employees on the site, a superintendent, a maintenance person, and an interpretive ranger to really develop the educational capability and the educational ties to both our universities as well as some of the statewide community colleges. But we find it really necessary that we would have 2 employees at that site. Managing those partner relationships with upwards of 13 partners is a full-time job in and of itself. And having the wherewithal and the professional capability to manage the complexities of this site would require a superintendent and a maintenance person to help us really keep up with those historic buildings. And so the sheet that you have in front of you does include those recurring costs for additional positions. There are 3 additional positions in that, as well as seasonal staff. And seasonal staff are absolutely wonderful to help us manage at the height of the season. But they're the folks who go out and mow the lawns. They're the folks who go out and weed whack and weed our yards. The operating budget at 442, and that's a biennial number, puts us at approximately $220,000 a year to operate the site. And those costs include things like heating. They include our supplies. They include the things that help us operate on a day-to-day level. And then, of course, we do have our non-recurring costs. As we move into that site, we would have nothing. And so as you wandered through the kitchen of the superintendent's house yesterday, there is no refrigerator. There is no oven. And all of the homes out there have been stripped of that. And so if we turn those areas back into living quarters of some sort, we would want to have some of those supplies available to us. And then I know Con will talk a little bit more about this, but going into a stabilization phase, that stabilization will allow us to fix those historic structures. It would allow us to re-roof the soils lab. It would allow us to do some of the things that we would need to do in order to make sure that we are creating a safe and healthy environment, not just for the staff, but really for the visitor. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Nope. So I guess we'll carry on.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I could, I just want to also point out that although Christina mentioned items for the houses, the bulk of that startup cost would be for equipment to care for the grounds, lawnmowers and the types of things that we would need to maintain that huge property over time. So that's part of it, but there are also a number of other things as well. Just to wrap it up, if I could ask Con to talk a little bit about the future construction and stabilization costs out of the site.
Con, do you want to state your name and your position?
Sure, Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair, members of the committee, good morning. Conrado Denise, Construction and Engineering Manager. I go by Con. To make it simple, we're all friends here, so. Yeah, so basically to touch a little bit on those numbers that you have in front of you on that fact sheet, as Christina mentioned, per your request at the last meeting, you were asked that we phase this out to make it more palatable. And we took a step back and determined what we need over the next 18 to 24 months to make this site, to A, prevent further deterioration to those historic structures, and B, to be able to safely open up the site to the visiting public, accessible requirements and whatnot. So that phase 1 stabilization primarily is driven by hazardous material remediation for some of the asbestos in the glazing, some mold remediation in the basements, some accessibility issues that we've got for some of the facilities that we'd like for the public to get to see. I think that itself gets us over the next 18 to 24 months ready to go. The subsequent phases, we're still working on the conceptual costs of those as well, but that would be primarily driven by that master plan process that would be right up the front, right up front in the site development process. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Co-Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I guess anyone could answer this. I know, I'm really excited about the fact that we have some partners. And I guess my question would be, and of course, this is the cart before the horse because we haven't, we're still in the early phases, but is there buy-in from some of the partners to help with staffing, to help with a variety of the things that we're going to have to deal with?
Madam Chairman, Senator Schuler.
Mr. Nalin.
A lot of those, as Carly Ann mentioned, a lot of those folks are in the room with us today, and I think they're eager to come up here and tell you about how they'd like to partner with us. But absolutely, they're definitely people who are ready to help us not only with staffing, but financial resources to do a little bit of this work.
Yeah, follow up? No. Okay. Any other questions? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think any of you might be able to answer this. So how many sites would then be within this district that State Parks manages if we add this in addition?
Chairman Newsom,
Ms. Byrd.
Representative Larson, I currently manage the Quebec One State Historic Site, the Historic Governor's Mansion, Kurt Gowdy State Park, Ames Monument, National Landmark, as well as the Wyoming Territorial Prison. So we add one more to that mix, not out of the scope of what district managers are responsible for.
Thank you. Anything else, JT? All right. Representative Burkhardt.
Madam Chairman, with your indulgence, I have numerous questions.
All right.
Thank you. So, and I'm going to go, Madam Chairman, I'm going to go a little far afield and come back. So my first question is, what's the current status of the Kendrick Ranch?
Who wants to take that? Mr. Nalin?
Madam Chairman, Representative Burkhardt, are you referring to the LX Bar?
The ranch, Madam Chairman, the ranch in the northern part of the state that the state picked up years ago that's landlocked and nobody can access?
Madam
Mr.
Chairman,
Nalin?
yeah, Madam Chairman, Representative Burkhardt, we still care for the site. We're developing plans to access the site. We've recently been in conversations with the adjacent landowner about extending the period of our easement to access. We've done some, Con has led the effort to work with some consultants to determine the cost to build a bridge to get across the river up there. And I'm sure he could tell you what they are off the top of his head, but they were exorbitant costs. It's a very expensive proposition. And I think as an agency, we're having a hard time justifying spending the kind of money it would take to build that bridge for the very little return of the few visitors we would have in that remote area.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a number of
Okay.
questions. So along the same lines, how much money is being put into the Fort Steele Historic Site currently, annually?
Mr. Nalin?
Madam Chairman, Representative Burkhardt, off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that question, but I'd be happy to get you that information. Very, very low amount, I could say, but without knowing, without it in front of me, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Mr. Nalin, can you expound on what Fort Steele is?
Exact.
On what Fort Steele is
Oh,
or where it is?
thank you. Fort Steele is a historic military fort that was set up on the North Platte River to provide protection for the railroad and for those emigrating to the west. It sits right, literally within 2 miles of the interstate,
Madam
right
Chairman,
there at
it's,
the North Platte
Mr.
River.
Nalin?
It's a site that's managed out of Seminole State Park, which is in the general vicinity.
One more or two
Oh,
more?
I have many
Five
more,
more,
Madam
20
Chairman.
more?
Yes, maybe 20.
Just go ahead.
So, looking at all of these sites and that, number of questions. Really, does the department have the money to take on an additional site that looks like just off the bat is going to start with close to $8 million?
Mr. Nalin?
Madam Chairman, Representative Burkhardt, absolutely not. We do not have the money to do that.
Okay, all right.
Representative?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, who owns the buildings? We talk about the land, but who owns the buildings?
Madam Chairman,
Mr.
Representative Burkhardt, I believe that the buildings are owned a combination of the City of Cheyenne and the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Okay, All right, so we, am I correct, Madam Chairman, am I correct that then we will be using state money to maintain buildings belonging to someone else?
Mr. Nalen?
Madam Chairman, Representative Burkhart, absolutely. You know, we do that statewide right now. Very few of the sites that we operate statewide are sites that we own. You'll note that all of our larger water parks are owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. We spend state funding to improve sites there that we don't own. Sites like Kirk County State Park, which is owned by the city through the Board of Public Utilities. We spend money out there on a regular basis to upgrade and maintain that. Medicine Lodge State Archaeological Site and Six Canyon State Park are sites that are owned by the Wyoming Game and Fish. We operate all these sites through MOUs and/or leases, which is a situation we would have with the Arboretum if it were to come to pass.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. So there was talk of the water facilities on the top of Round Hill out there. So, and the idea being to allow the public in there to recreate and that sort of thing. Now, I could be under the wrong impression, but I thought that after 9/11, water systems were considered to be critical infrastructure that had to be secured, and now we're inviting people to go roam around the water system, and that's first part. The second part is, who is going to be responsible? To me, it looks like the Department of State Parks is going to take over taking care of the city of Cheyenne's water system out there.
Madam
Mr.
Chairman, Representative Burkhart, I'm going to defer to Christina on part of that answer, but I'd like to start off by saying that the site is open to the public right now. So people can go out there right now to tour and walk around. Us being there, I think, would have the opposite effect likely. Our presence, our staff living on site, our 24-hour presence would probably discourage people from getting up there and interfering with that water system. And I'd like to throw it over to Christina, if I might, to elaborate.
Chairman Newsom, Representative Burkhart, thank you for that question. The Round Top facilities are currently owned and operated by Cheyenne's Board of Public Utilities, and you are correct. They are federally protected sites. However, the Board of Public Utilities has plans. They've built a new water treatment facility, and they are currently transferring over their operations to that facility. As they transfer their operations to that facility, then that water filtration plant, which is no longer used, will no longer be part of the water infrastructure. And so as they continue to move out of that area, transferring over their infrastructure, then it will no longer have the federal protection, and we can operate it as a recreational area if we so choose.
Madam Chairman, if I could
Mr. Nalen?
add to that, Representative Burkhart, the Board of Public Utilities is also supportive of this project, so they're supportive of our role in potentially managing the site.
Representative?
No, I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? No? Okay, any more information that you have, Mr. Nalen?
Madam Chairman, barring any other questions, I think that's all that we had to present to you today. As I said earlier, I know there are a lot of folks here from our potential partner agencies who'd love to speak with you.
Great. Well, if you would stay nearby, if we have additional questions for you, I would appreciate it. I guess we will move now to public comment. Anybody that would like to comment on the Arboretum? Mr. Mayor? And if you would like to come up, if you would like to comment, you're welcome to just come up, and it kind of saves us a little bit of time from having people go back and forth. Welcome, Mr. Mayor, if you would introduce yourself and.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Patrick Collins, Mayor of the City of Cheyenne. And I really came mostly just to listen today, but I just want to make sure that everybody here understands that the City of Cheyenne is very excited about the potential of a partnership with the state parks to develop this site. We believe it's an amazing piece of our state's history. We don't have the resources to adequately protect it and to deliver it to the public, and we think a partnership would be the best way to do that. And so our city council at our last meeting unanimously passed a resolution encouraging you guys to move forward and to become a partner with us in this process.
Great. Any questions for the mayor? JT, I'm sorry, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So assuming this is approved, would the city still put a financial interest into this property, continuing on your budget? So.
Madam
Mr.
Chairman,
Mayor.
through you to the representative, part of the partnership that we talked about yesterday is the growing of trees. And I see that as being one area that the city wants to take responsibility for. The folks to grow the trees and the partnership, as part of our partnership, working to remediate the area and get it ready for being able to plant and grow trees for both the state and for the city. So yeah, we definitely see that being part of it, having staff out there managing that part of the operation. And again, as we work through the MOU, we'll see what that looks like. But I think our city council fully understands that part of it and is willing to move forward.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, and you might not have this information right off the top of your head, but what's your current annual cost to manage this site?
Sir,
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, through you, I don't know that answer. It's pretty minimal at this time. We had an intern out there this summer. We've sent staff out as we can, but at this point, we don't really have a lot. We're just doing our best to try to keep those trees alive until hopefully a partnership of some sort can come along where we can develop that site.
Anything else? Any other questions from the committee? Oh, Representative Burkhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Mayor, yesterday when we were on our tour, heard a lot of discussion of we plan to do these things, we being the city of Cheyenne. And to me, it strikes me that you want to do these things using state money to benefit one particular community. Am I correct?
Madam Chairman, through you. Sir, when I say we, I think of everybody, all those 13 partners that were talked about earlier, the state parks, the city, everybody. And I think the state would benefit from this, the educational opportunities for people to come and see how we got where we are today. When Cheyenne was established in 1867, the rumor is we had 12 trees in the community. Today we have hundreds of thousands. And I think the reason for that is that we, through this facility, figured out what would grow, what would survive. And I think it makes our community so much more livable when you have an urban forest and things. So the story of this site is tremendous. And then when you look at some of the other history, like the Conservation Corps and things that were there, I just think it's a very special place.
Madam Chairman,
Representative.
follow up. So you've indicated the importance to the city of Cheyenne. Is it important enough for Cheyenne to spend the money to do what you plan to do? If it was that important, I'd expect that you and the city council would be jumping at the chance to do all the work out there and, as you said, develop it. If we're trying to save historic sites, why are we developing them?
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, through you, sir, if we had the money to do that, we would do that. We just don't have the resources or the ongoing resources to do it. And we also don't have the expertise. When I look at state parks, when they do these historic sites, they're so good at the interpretive part of it. And it's just the expertise that you guys have. And we have the expertise in growing trees and doing some things like that. So I think the partnership, bringing your expertise and our expertise together would make this an amazing place.
Representative?
No.
Okay. Any other? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor, would you just kind of touch on the process that, from your perspective, that you've been involved in? I think what we're hearing is just concern that this is a Cheyenne project, when everything I heard yesterday was talking about the statewide benefit. And I'm guessing, and I've looked at not guessing, I've looked at it, the criteria process that State Parks employs really checks off, whether or not this is a place of state interest. But I'm curious to know if that's your perspective, having been involved with some of those meetings and the development of that document. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, through you to the senator. Yes, ma'am, I 100% agree with that. I look at like Quebec 1, it's a piece of Wyoming history. It's a piece of Cheyenne F.E. Warren Air Force Base's history, but it's also a piece of our nation's history. And I kind of look at this as being the same thing. USDA came and they've done this work, and it's just a really important, I think, piece of history that I want to make sure is saved. And so we've done our best to try to keep the trees alive, but if we really want to take this to the next level, I think a partnership is what it's going to take.
Senator.
Madam Chairman, if I could make one more comment to the Representative Burkhardt. You did ask about the water facilities that we have out there. And we have that 11 million gallon tank that we looked at yesterday. We're building a new tank next to our existing tank in the northern part of Cheyenne, and we're going to abandon those facilities from the Board of Public Utilities. So we will not be using those as an operational, the water treatment plant we don't use now, the storage tank we will be abandoning here, hopefully in the next 18 months, 24 months. And so those facilities will not be used by the Board of Public Utilities in the future.
Representative Burkhardt.
Thank you. So, Mayor, if you abandon them, who becomes, under this agreement, if you do this, who becomes responsible for the reclamation of that 11 million gallon tank?
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, through you, I think that's part of what the MOU is. I don't know what the vision for the use of that, whether we would, we would just take that facility out. But I would hope maybe there might be some historic use that maybe people could tour. I just don't know what that looks like, but I think that's what we're asking to do, is to have an opportunity to meet with all of our partners to see what those things could be and how we work together to do them.
Representative Burkhardt. Any other questions? Representative Larson. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Co-Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just another question, Mayor. Right now, there's not a lot of money flowing out that way from the city of Cheyenne. Do you anticipate, depending on how the MOU goes and how this all goes down, that you might be able to make that a budgetary concern later on in the future, if we're really going to truly be partners? And I don't care if it's staffing or if it's, infrastructure or what it is. Do you anticipate that you could add some things to your budget to help out, to truly help out state parks and any other partners that might be involved?
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, to the co-chairman, yes, ma'am, I do. As we spoke, and we saw on our tour, the head house, the greenhouses, the lath house, that operation, I see that being an area that the city really wants to be part of. The maintaining of the historic trees, and the staff that might be necessary to help with that. I think our council is very, they're aware that there's going to be some costs in this partnership, and I think we're excited about that.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I share some of the same concerns as Representative Burkhardt. I think that that while this may impact the entire state, there might be some statewide benefits. I think the majority of the benefits lie with the city of Cheyenne, and that's just my opinion. But I don't know what your thoughts are on if the city could, have a 25% stake in this project down the road. Maybe look at that in the future. But just what are your thoughts on that?
Mayor Collins.
Madam Chairman, I don't know what 25% looks like, Representative. But as I've stated earlier, I think we're going to be a substantial partner. There's a real need to grow trees. We have the expertise. We want to do that. There's a need to maintain trees, and we have folks here, and State Parks has folks that are experts at that. We can partner to do that, not only just the trees that are in the Arboretum, but there's another 1,000 trees on that site. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think we'll be able to find a way to fairly split that up so that we're all feeling good about the partnership.
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm curious, from the tree perspective and the seedlings, and is there an avenue for creating a revenue stream in the future?
Mayor.
Madam Chairman, through you, I'm a small business person, and Representative, the answer is probably yes, but I would be hesitant to want to get into the business of selling trees to the public and being in competition with the private sector. We would have an unfair advantage, and I'm not sure that would be fair. But I do believe, yes, ma'am, that there is an opportunity to do that. We'd have to be very careful about how we do that.
Representative Storer, follow-up.
Yes, please. Would it make sense to consider, a contract with a private sector individual who would be doing some of that work, but also using the resources that exist? at the Arboretum.
Mayor Collins?
Madam Chairman, absolutely. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but if there's a better way to skin that cat, I would sure like to look at it.
Anything else, Representative? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, guys.
Maybe you want to hang around? That would be great. Let's go. You guys flip a coin and decide who goes next.
Right. Madam Chair, Jacob Mares, I'm the Community Forestry Coordinator for the Wyoming State Forestry Division. I spoke a little bit when we were in Casper, kind of trying to field some tree questions. I brought someone with me who is probably the leading expert on this site, but before I let him talk, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of the history that Wyoming State Forestry Division has had as far as funding at the site as well. We have used, in partnership with the city over the last possibly 30-some years, pass-through federal grant funding to do projects at this site. So there has been a constant flow of grant funds going to the site over the years. And this partnership with state forestry, state parks, the city, all these other entities we're talking about, a big component, I think, in the future of funding will be seeking some of these federal grants that are directed towards arboretums, towards nurseries, towards caring for these trees. So I just wanted to put that history out there, and with that, I'll let Scott introduce himself and give you a little history.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, my name is Scott Skogerbro, and I'm the horticulturist and plant propagator at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery down in Colorado. My family is originally from Wyoming, so I come up here all the time. My father was raised in Crook County, and my second great-grandfather was a pioneer here in 1878. And so even though I've never lived in Wyoming myself, I've spent a lot of time here. I first came to the Cheyenne Station in 1991 after I got out of the Army and was going to CSU with a GI Bill to study horticulture. And there I fell in love with the trees because I was just learning trees. I was just learning them, and lo and behold, to the west side of every tree was a label. So I could know what they were. I learned that the accession numbers corresponded to the years that they were planted. So if it said A31-265, it was planted in 1931. It was the 265th plant that was in the record books. And these tomes, these ancient tomes from the early 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, you could go and find out where these trees came from. And I became obsessed and started going to the station a lot. I wanted to know the people who were responsible for these trees. And I got to know Gene Howard, who was the last director of the Cheyenne Station before it closed in 1974. And we became friends. He became my mentor. And when he passed away, he willed me every one of his horticulture books and every publication that he ever wrote. I wanted to know about his predecessor, which was Dr. Hildreth, who was the first director of the Cheyenne Station, and I talked to his grandchildren, and they gave me his records, his family records, so I knew all about them. And I chased down the USDA publication for the plant introduction numbers, and I found out at the station, they weren't just trees, just growing there, these beautiful trees, some of them thriving, some of them dying, some of them just barely hanging on, because they hadn't been watered since 1974, and I came on the scene in 1991. And so I would first go to the ones that were thriving, and I found out that there was the Lewis Mock Orange was found originally on the Lewis and Clark expedition, state flower of Idaho, and is thriving. And it's growing there at the station, and we found that it was collected in Alberta at the Northern Range, which was an important thing to know because it also grows in California. So the ones that are grown from Idaho or from Alberta were the ones that could make it here and they evolved with the mule deer so they weren't being eaten. I also found that in my research that, because I'm a student of history, that there's trees there that, like the sweet bow apple, that was planted at Monticello with President Jefferson, is at the station. I found that there was a tree called the Desfontaine cherry, which was named after René Desfontaine, who was the French president of the Academies of Science during the time of King Louis the 16th. And when the king wants a famous botanist to be his gardener, he says, I want you, and you are now the gardener. Then the French Revolution happened, and everybody associated with the king had to go into hiding. And fortunately, René Desfontaine survived the French Revolution, and his tree is at the station. We found that the very first USD explorer was named Nels Hansen, and he was a professor at South Dakota State in Brookings. And he went to Russia 7 times, twice during the Russian Revolution, and he collected seeds that were at the Tsar Nicholas Alexander at his palace in St. Petersburg. And that tree is at the station. It's called the Dogo crabapple, and it's across the country now. We also found that there was a very famous plant exploration called the Dorset-Morse expedition that came to China in 1927 during the Chinese Revolution, when Chiang Kai-shek was chasing Mao around the country. And there's photographs of Dr. Dorset, an old man, maybe looks to be 70, maybe 80 years old, riding on a donkey. And he found a tree called the Hung Hai Tung crabapple, which is the most beloved tree at the station. Almost everybody that I go there, when I give tours up there, it's their favorite tree. That was found in a Buddhist temple called the Fa Hua Shu, and it was a living stupa. The Buddhists, when a poor monk would die, they would plant a tree over him. If a rich monk died, they planted a stone monument. So this was a living stupa, and it's still at the station. It's 92 years old, and it's thriving. So the thing about this station, I think that this state park, every person that I've brought there, when I asked the question after I've given my tours, I said, is it better or is it worse than you thought it would be? I've never heard someone say it's worse. Everybody says, oh, it's way better. And it is. People have said it's a national treasure, especially, because my friends are horticulturists, my people are plant people. And when you are visiting the station, when you see that the High Plains Arboretum, it's going to be plants people, and it can be probably drawn from anybody that's traveling through the region are going to go there. And these trees are spectacular, but the ones that aren't, they can be rejuvenated. Unlike other living creatures, plants, when you take cuttings, are rejuvenated, they become young again. And so we can make them young again, bring them back. The one that comes to mind the most is one that was collected in Nepal. It's called the Nepalese mock orange. And it's last out at the station, it's barely alive because it was planted, 88 years ago. But we can take cuttings, make it young again, and replant it at the station. We can bring that station back to its former glory. It's still good, even as it is, because there's enough trees there that are really doing well. And so I think that this station at this state park could really well be one of the, it's never going to rival Yellowstone, but it is going to be something that the state of Wyoming and the region can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving on.
Madam Chairman, good morning. My name is Megan Stanfill. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Historic Wyoming. Over the past 2 years, we have hosted tours specifically emphasizing the CCC structures at the site. And it's brought in so much interest. And it's not just Cheyenne. It's folks coming down from Casper, folks coming over from Laramie, folks coming up from Colorado. And they're just interested to see inside and what are these buildings and visit these places. And from our point of view, we've worked with the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens, we've worked with the City of Cheyenne, and we've worked with the Girl Scouts out of Montana to be able to use the site and go on and show people the last standing CCC toilet from the Round Top State Park. So there's so many great resources there, and we're just really excited to see this bill coming to pass, and it's just really exciting for us to finally see movement out there, because all of these buildings, to keep them alive, you have to have people in there. You have to have people going in there, maintaining them, and all of the people who use these structures, all the city, the Botanic Gardens, the USDA, the Forestry Division, they're all trying to do their best. And I think the state stepping in is the next step that needs to happen, because it's not just a Cheyenne resource. It's a state resource. It's also a national resource. And going back to being national, I think it's so great that this year is the year where we're having these conversations, because it's the 90th anniversary of the Civilian Conservation Corps. And we can highlight that history because their structure's still standing. And they had such a great influence across our state that we have a place that can be a national resource for CCC interpretation. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Stanfield? No? Okay, moving on. Ms. Freeze, thank you so much for your cooperation yesterday with our tour. It was great to have you there.
Absolutely, happy to do it. I appreciate all the comments that have already been said about the rich history about this.
So you probably still
I'm
need
sorry.
to introduce yourself for the record.
Sorry. I'm Madam Chairman. I am Jessica Freese, horticulturist at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens, and I've been doing extensive research on the High Plains Arboretum and the horticultural field station over the past couple of years, and wrote a book about it, about my research. But my research is ongoing, and every day I learn something fascinating and new about this place. And I appreciate all that's been said so far about the rich history of this site. But I wanted to focus my comments a little bit on the potential for the future impact of this site, and especially this partnership. Just to give you a little bit of what we've been doing over the past couple years, the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens has been focusing more on the Arboretum over the past 2 years than we had in the past. And during that time, we've partnered with Microsoft. They gave us a grant for a public awareness campaign, and that book was published as part of that campaign. As Jake mentioned, we've been working with State Forestry for many years, ever since the city got involved with the site in the early 2000s. And we've received multiple grants through State Forestry to help with interpretive signage, to help with labor out there, to help with caring for those trees and maintaining these historic trees. We, as Jake and the mayor both mentioned, we had an intern out there this summer who was funded in part by a State Forestry grant. So we have that past history with the state already. We also have had conversations with Laramie County Conservation District, who approached us actually last fall, about a year ago, with concerns that they are struggling to find seedling trees for their shelter belt programs in Laramie County. And I'm sure that the conservation districts in other part of the states, although we haven't spoken directly with them, are having those same issues. A lot of those tree seedlings used to come from CSU, and CSU now has such a great demand for tree seedlings for reforestation efforts in the state of Colorado due to forest fires, that they're not making their seedlings trees available to other states. And so State Forestry has also expressed concern for their own reforestation efforts, that they're having a hard time finding supplies of seedling trees. And both of those, the Conservation District and State Forestry, have talked to us about using the greenhouse facility at the Arboretum to help grow seedling trees for the state of Wyoming. And with that facility, we already, with just a little bit of restoration work, we can get that facility up and running fairly quickly and be providing seedling trees for the entire state. And the importance of growing those trees in the state of Wyoming from seed collected in the state of Wyoming cannot be understated, because if we're growing trees, if we're planting trees in our Wyoming forests that were grown in Oregon or Washington or places where they can quickly grow evergreen trees and ship them out, they don't have the genetic information that comes from generations of trees growing in our climate to help them really thrive in Wyoming forests. So growing Wyoming trees in Wyoming that then are planted again in Wyoming is really vital to the future of our Wyoming forests. And as we've all seen, forest fires are becoming ever more common, and that reforestation effort will only become more important in future years. Another potential partnership that we've had discussions with already is the Wyoming Wind River Indian Reservation. The Cheyenne Botanic Gardens already provides vegetable seeds to them every year for their not Grow a Little Extra, that's a different program, for their Grow Your Own program, where they help residents of the reservation grow their own vegetable gardens and produce their own produce. And so the Botanic Gardens has already been providing vegetable seeds, but we've already had discussions with them. They'd also be interested in fruit trees. And that's another thing that the Cheyenne Station has, that history of fruit tree research, of fruit trees that do well in Wyoming that have been tested and proven in Cheyenne that we can then propagate and help share with not only the Wind River Indian Reservation, but other parts of the state. So the potential for impacting our statewide plant collection in the future really is important. And without this partnership with the state, it would be really difficult for the city to meet that capacity. We know how to grow the trees, but getting our greenhouse restored, it's such an important historic building that State Parks has that expertise in restoring historic buildings, and we really would need that partnership to help get that operation going to its fullest potential. And so that's what I wanted to focus my comments on, is really the future potential that this site has.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm glad you brought up about the idea of growing trees for statewide use, because I think that's a big deal with this project. And I noticed that the Laramie County Conservation District has been one of the partners. I'm kind of wondering how we would involve conservation districts from around the state, because I think marketing this, if this does go forward, to other conservation districts would be huge. And it would make it more of a statewide project rather than just, this area here. And even though I think it's going to end up being something that all of us will probably enjoy at one time or another, but maybe you could talk about that, Jessica.
Ms. Breeze.
Yes, Madam Chairman and Senator Schuler, absolutely. There's definitely the potential for partnerships with other conservation districts around the state. As I mentioned, we haven't already had those conversations yet, but we're definitely open to the idea of expanding those partnerships. And as far as seedling trees are concerned, I mean, seedling trees are grown in tubes that are this big. And you guys all saw those greenhouses yesterday. We can fit a lot of seedling trees in those greenhouses. And so we definitely don't need to limit it to the Cheyenne area. We can expand those efforts to reach conservation districts statewide.
Thank you. Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And this is for any of the four of you. It's not directed at any one of you. So if there's such demand for trees and for seedlings, why isn't someone already doing this? Why isn't someone growing them? I mean, I have volunteer trees that come up in my yard that I've got to dig out. I like some grass too. Some of those I've actually let grow. But why isn't someone growing them? I mean, I can pick up a gazillion cottonwood seeds and pine tree seeds and plant them, and I have little pine trees coming up in my yard. So why isn't someone already doing this? I mean, why do we need to restore this facility in order for the trees to be grown?
Mr. Mares.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, Representative. I would say that if we take a look at the United States and how many states do actively have nursery programs, it's the majority. Wyoming has always relied on our neighboring states for trees. Like Jessica had mentioned, the CSU facility provides hundreds of thousands of trees to our conservation districts throughout the state. Their facility did go through some repairs and some stuff that took them out of the game last year, and it was very, very hard for our conservation districts to find trees. And again, like Jessica mentioned, trees that have provenance from our area. We were getting trees from states that, it's probably not great to be adding that genetics to our area, but I think the problem has been is we've always relied on these outside states, but we've seen a national call for more trees, and it's just growing exponentially. So I think you're going to see within the next 10 years an explosion of private nurseries, state nurseries ramping up their production. And this just happened to be a tie-in with state forestry. We currently collect seed throughout the state, Ponderosa mainly, that we would like to use for these reforestation efforts eventually. So hopefully that answers the question, but this just happens to be a facility that did that 100 years ago. And here we are 100 years in the future, and it's, we could use this for the same reason again.
Madam Chairman, just a quick follow-up.
Sure,
Maybe this is
Representative.
kind of more of a personal question and a business question. So what's a seedling tree worth? I'll dig them up out of my yard.
Well,
Mayor.
in a contractual grow, and Scott, you might be able to help on this too. Maybe I'll just pass it to you.
So I've worked at a wholesale nursery in Fort Collins for 30 years, and I've grown 7 million trees, so I know that answers your question.
Please.
We will grow, let's just take bur oaks. Bur oaks are native to the state of Wyoming up in Crook County, but they're also native to Oklahoma, and they're giant chicken egg looking things, but the ones grown in Wyoming are about the size of a nickel. So that's because the growing season is shorter here than in Oklahoma, so they need to ripen their fruit quicker so that they're not very big. So we will grow trees, acorns that are collected from kin up in Crook County, and grow them. We sell them as Wyoming bur oaks. And so we will have a flat of 36, and they're a year old, and they're usually about 6 inches tall, and we sell them for about $2.50 a piece. So they're not very much wholesale price, and they're very popular. We actually, we want to thank the state of Wyoming because they've been one of our greatest customers for 92 years. We've been in business since 1931. And so a lot of our trees are around, in the municipalities throughout the state. And so we've gone out of our way to go and try to find plants that match the climate. The provenance, as Jessica mentioned, is very important. So we steer people right. So that's what it is. And one of the reasons that we have learned along the way, especially, our neighbors here in Cheyenne, is hail incidence is so great here, and they can ruin a nursery real quick. Doesn't necessarily kill the trees, but it makes them unsaleable while they're young and ready to be planted in someone's yard. So if someone was to open up a business up here, it would be best if they put a nice greenhouse operation, maybe, high tunnels and shade cloth and lath houses, and you could do it. You could do it up here very well. And but I think just because neighboring states like Nebraska, the Bessie Nursery, it also supplies a lot of plants for the state of Wyoming and the Colorado State Forest Service Nursery. They don't have to have the expense of having all that because their incidents of hail are protected by the Cheyenne Ridge. So we don't have as much hail as we do down in Fort Collins.
Representative, you good? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a question for Jessica. Is the Arboretum currently coordinating with any national seed banks for the preservation of these unique specimens that we have on site?
Ms. Freeze.
Madam Chairman and Representative Singh, not currently, but that's definitely something that we can coordinate in the future. And Scott told me this, so he can explain if I don't explain it correctly, but there has been some interest in, for example, our crabapple collection that I pointed out yesterday from the Canadian researcher, where someone was looking for those crabapple trees that were in the national database from the USDA. And so they were asking for, if they could collect from those trees. So there has been a little bit of interest. There are some trees that we have that are hard to find in other places, but without having a full-time staff member out there, it's been hard to kind of coordinate those efforts of communication, because I'm just out there on a part-time basis, and we have another part-time employee through Cheyenne Urban Forestry currently. But yeah, definitely that's a potential in the future, is to communicate more about our collection and be able to share that with other people nationwide, because we do have some very special trees out there that are getting hard to find.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What do you anticipate the output of seedlings being on a yearly basis if we were to incorporate this project, and what is the need given the wildfires that are occurring and things of that nature? Thank you.
Do you want to take that, Ms. Freeze, or anybody else?
Madam Chairman, I can give you the best shot. And Representative Singh, the city has kind of tossed around the number of goal of 10,000 seedlings to kind of get started. With seedling trees, propagating woody plants is also not a simple matter. You have tree seeds that need certain scarification processes, and some things you can propagate fairly easy from cuttings. Others are more complicated, and grafting and things like that. So it takes a few years to really get things going. I've started some efforts at the Botanic Gardens of taking more cuttings of the trees and shrubs we have at the Arboretum and just using our own facility for that so far. So I've probably got a couple hundred cuttings that we've done just on this part-time basis over the last year. And but yeah, the city has kind of set the goal of 10,000 once we could get things starting. But like I said, it might take a year or two to get to that point. And then the more time and experience we have, then the more we can expand into the future. I know the Conservation District had given us a number when I met with them a year ago, but I can't remember off the top of my head what their current need was for trees for their shelter belt program. But that was kind of our goal that we were setting once we could get things started.
A follow-up, Representative? No. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to add a little bit on top of that. So I would say when it comes to the reforestation efforts too that we're talking about, the conservation districts do have a large need, but other states, if you take a look at them, they're talking hundreds of thousands of trees for reforestation efforts and burn scars. So while our program may be in its infancy, we could potentially be looking at providing a vast amount of trees. However, that would mean expansion of facilities and people to care for these facilities. And I kind of just wanted to circle back, and we've talked about the importance of the trees on the site, not just in the Arboretum, but historically site-wide. Like the mayor mentioned, the extra thousands of trees that are outside of the 80 acres of the Arboretum. They are a extremely valuable germplasm that we can pull from to create climate-ready trees for the future, not just for Wyoming, but for our entire region, if not nationally. So they're very important. However, each one of those trees is very different and has a very different set of needs. So when we're talking about the care of the facility and stuff, we also need to always remember that the care of the trees out there is paramount. We have slowly been losing trees out there steadily over the years, as Scott pointed out. Some of these trees that could potentially change the way we look at street tree plantings or windrows or stuff like that. So it's paramount that we protect those trees, but that also takes a lot of care and a lot of work as well. So, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Any other comments from the panel? Okay, thank you all for your testimony. Anyone else would like to talk about the Arboretum? No? Oh, okay. Circle back to state parks. A question from Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we had a list of the state's historical sites sent to us, and I'm looking at your map on your website, and not all of them are placed on the map. So I just was curious why that is.
Mr. Nalen?
Madam Chairman and Representative Larson, I'd have to see the specific map you're talking about to adequately answer that question. I know that we tend to promote our historic sites that are staffed much more frequently than we do our unstaffed sites, and the majority of our historic sites are sites that we care for but have no staff. And so we're a little bit more careful about directing people to some of those sites because of the sensitive nature.
Any other questions for State Parks? Great, thank you, Mr. Nalen. Any other comments from the public? Do we have Mr. Sweeney online? Okay. So I guess we will close this portion. What I would like to do is create a working group to work through the details of this proposed state historic site. Representative Bob Nicholas would like to be on that committee, and I've assigned him the chair of that committee. Mr. Nalen will be on the committee, or on the working group. Senator Ellis has agreed, as has Representative Singh, to be part of that group. Representative Larson, your name came up. Are you interested? Okay, we'll put Representative Larson on there. And then representatives from the city of Cheyenne, from forestry, and then Representative Nicholas will have the ability to add members as he sees fit to go forward in crafting this legislation.
So, Madam Chairman, your intent is to then take this up in the next interim?
We're hoping that Representative Nicholas will have, not in the next interim, but will have a bill in the session that will be personally sponsored, I believe.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just wondering, considering we've run to the
Yeah,
end of our committee
We're pretty
for
much
the interim. Yes.
done, and Representative Nicholas has a keen interest in this, and so he is taking this on.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand it. Okay, so then we will, let's just, the next thing on our agenda is the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund bill, and I just wanted everybody to have the amended copy of that. We won't have any discussion on that today. We already passed it through, but I did want everybody to have that copy. As we entertain that bill, what we need is for that bill to get introduced. Senator Schuler will take that in the Senate, and hopefully she can get it introduced there. I will personally sponsor a mayor bill, the exact same bill in the House. I will send all of you co-sponsor requests if you would like to be co-sponsor on that bill. Just in case we lose it in the Senate, then we would still have a bill in the House to be introduced, and that's kind of the plan there. So no action taken on that. And then I would like to take probably a 10-minute break. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. So we'll be back at 20 till 11. Okay, we will come back from our recess, and we're a little bit ahead of time, but I'm sure Diane can take that time up. I am confident in her ability to talk a little bit longer. Okay, I thought you might. So, and Kari, welcome to you. Glad you made a good decision to join our Office of Tourism. So Diane, if you would like to start, that'd be great.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. It's great to be with you today. We're looking forward to giving you a tour of the Southeast Wyoming Welcome Center a little bit later over your lunchtime. I'm Diane Schober. I'm the Executive Director at the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And here with me today is Kari Akins. Kari joined our team in August. She is our Director of Strategy and Business Operations. And while she may be new to the Wyoming Office of Tourism, she certainly is not new to state government, and I'm sure many of you in some of her past iterations have had a chance to work with her and probably are fully aware of her capabilities and her expertise. Needless to say, we are thrilled to have her as part of our team, and she has hit the ground running. And I'm going to be turning this over to her in just a moment, but wanted to just bring you up to speed on the materials that were included in your packet. There's a footnote in the budget bill for an appropriation from the Project and Reserve Fund in $1.5 million to be used for the Southeast and Northeast Wyoming Welcome Centers for an update on their interpretive exhibits and also for the Q1 State Historic Sites. We've had some conversations around these items before, and Kari has taken over the leadership of that endeavor. And she's here today to give you an update on it. We certainly can answer any questions. And if you want any other information just on tourism overall, happy to do so at the conclusion. It's been a good summer and we're looking forward to a good fall. Thank goodness we still get to have visitors in October into Wyoming. So with that, Madam Chairman and members of the committee, I'll defer to Kari for an update on this report.
Great. Just first, any questions from the committee? Okay. Then we'll go forward. Thank you, Kari, and go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I am Kari Akins, and I'm here to talk to you about the $1.5 million that was appropriated to the Office of Tourism for renovations and enhancements at the Northeast and Southeast Welcome Centers, as well as at the Quebec One State Historic Site. You can see in the report that was provided a summary of activities up to date. A lot of it has just been information gathering and making sure that everybody understands kind of how those welcome centers function, the status of Quebec One as a state historic site. And then a task force was assembled. And you can see there are several representatives from state parks that are a part of this, as well as the Office of Tourism. Since this memo was submitted, we also did decide to add a representative from the Wyoming Department of Transportation because WYDOT actually does own the Northeast and Southeast Welcome Centers. And then there's an agreement between the Office of Tourism and WYDOT for the maintenance of those facilities and grounds. We have completed, State Parks has completed the Quebec One concept design for the exhibit. They did submit a request to the Office of Tourism for $275,000 for the installation of that exhibit. It would take 2 of the bedrooms that are in Quebec One and turn them into a single gallery space that highlights the Peacekeeper missile as well as the warhead, and has some pretty interactive elements, including going over who worked the site, some artifacts, as well as an actual interactive that simulates a nuclear explosion, so someone could simulate what it was to send off the missile. A lot of really interesting part of that, but also just about why the missiles were a priority of the U.S. military, why they were retired, and what is done now as far as the nuclear force in Wyoming and in the country. So that is a recommendation that the task force has made to accept, and that will go before the Wyoming Tourism Board at the end of this month when they meet. And so that will be a discussion for them on October 25th. And then following the site visits that were conducted last month, we did actually visit all 3 sites as a task force and took a look at the state of all 3 of those sites. And then with the welcome centers, took a look at the condition and the engagement level of all of the exhibits and components of those sites. And from that have identified some priorities for drafting an RFP. And so following our meeting earlier this week, I'm just getting underway for that. We are looking at updating and replacing the interpretive signs. A lot of the outdoor signs are too weather damaged to read. And then on the indoor side of things, they are pretty text heavy and not maybe as interactive as what we would hope for. And so looking at some updates of those signs, and then also making sure that the sign placement goes, now that these welcome centers have been in place for over a decade, there's kind of the paved path that people assumed people would walk, but then the beaten path is maybe not what was assumed. And so moving some things around to accommodate for that as well. There are also several interactive elements that need to be either repaired or replaced. You will unfortunately be able to see some of that when you tour the Southeast Welcome Center here in just a little bit. And then also looking to explore further interactive and digital elements and recommendations for any exhibit replacement. Not sure that any exhibit replacement is going to be required, but we probably do need to have an expert come in and do that full evaluation. We do know that the 1.5 million should be ample to cover replacement of signs and a lot of the refreshing of those interactive elements and those digital elements that are, I guess you would say, have gone dead. But beyond that, we also need to keep in mind that we will want to use some of that money to pull people off of the interstates and into these 3 wonderful sites. And so the RFP will help us get a picture of how much will be required for the replacement of the signs, those elements, a couple of other smaller upgrades, and then know what we are looking at as far as being able to put a little more muscle into marketing these facilities as well. So that basically brings us up to date with the $1.5 million appropriation that was in the 2022 budget footnote.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You answered a couple of the questions that I had. One of the things I was going to ask about would be engagement with your younger ones when they come in. You know, a lot of times they want to touch things, but now because of digital, I'm guessing that you're probably going to go a little bit more that direction. I just wondered if there's anything specific with virtual or digital stuff that you could share with us.
Madam
Ms.
Chairman,
Aiken?
Senator Schuler. So both of the sites already do a pretty good job of having a mix when it was installed, but all of that tech is over a decade old now. So that's where the repair or replacement of a lot of those interactive elements is necessary. And then I think a large part of it too is that there is the 24-hour area versus the actual welcome center area. And so maybe trying to find a way to bring some of that interactiveness out into the 24-hour area that probably can be better facilitated in a digital fashion. A lot of the wear and tear on some of the exhibits are from the more interactive portions of the you know, we like having those hands-on things for people to feel like they're actually experiencing something, and it makes it a more memorable moment for them. And we certainly want to be able to keep those elements as well. We don't want to make it a fully digital experience, but there are some wonderful immersive spaces in both of the centers, and there will be in Quebec One with that exhibit installation. So we want to make sure that there's that element of it as well, but adding some keeping those interactive technology pieces up to date, and then maybe looking at some ways that people can take some elements with them in a digital fashion will hopefully help enhance that visitor experience and increase the length of stay for visitors to these sites.
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a follow-up too. Do you think the signage that we have, the outdoor signage, so people know that this is coming before they get there, is that adequate, or do we need to do more in that area?
Ms. Aikens?
Madam Chairman, Senator Schuler, we are assuming that we're going to want to add some more signage or some things that show it that it's more than just a typical rest area. It says information center. Other than that, you know, you've got free Wi-Fi. That does pull a fair amount of people into that facility, but I don't know that people understand the quality of exhibits and the quality of information that is available, as opposed to your typical, you know, just pull over, use the facilities and grab a brochure. These welcome centers are not that. And so we'll need to make sure that some of that 1.5 million appropriation is reserved for informing people about the opportunities that are at these stops.
Follow up. Any other questions? I have one. When we were in Evanston for our first meeting, we toured Bear River State Park, and that's a visitor center. Wondering, I know back in the day, we had some plans to renovate that, or is that still on the table for future?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, we're looking at hopefully on a long-range plan for not only gateway welcome centers, which Bear River State Park is one, and it does, I think, need attention. Certainly, our partners at state parks take good care of it. They're providing the visitor services, but to make it an immersive hub, the way that welcome centers should work to do their job. Their job is really to get people out into the state of Wyoming, to see more places, visit more areas, participate more, thus extending that length of stay, and then contributing to a greater economic value of that trip. That's the purpose. And so what we want to do is look at collectively Sheridan, Bear River, even what's going on Jackson. Their visitor center is the combo of the federal partners and state partners right there near the elk refuge. And that hasn't been redone in, I don't know when it was built. I don't think it's ever had anything done to it. So, and then what about then we look at what's happening locally with interior. You know, Casper has a high visitation. They're using the Historic Trails Center as their visitor center, but it's closed on, you know, weekends and evenings. And so there's just, I think, some great work on a comprehensive plan that we can do with these. And Bear River is a high priority for us. Bear River and Sheridan would be the next. After we get these done with Southeast and Northeast, we would look at those two gateway centers as the next step.
So just for the committee, the southeast one is here in Cheyenne and the northeast one is in Sundance.
Yeah, they're gateway centers are typically operated as a responsibility of a state. They are intended to provide an experience of what you can expect as you travel throughout the state. I-25 northbound has the highest volume of non-commercial truck traffic of any of our interstate highways. And therefore, that's why this Southeast Center that you'll visit in just a little bit this today is positioned there. It's on the inbound lane. At one time, the Welcome Center, the land was gifted to the state of Wyoming, and it was over behind the McDonald's right at College Drive. We called it the Where's Waldo of Welcome Centers. You really had to want to get there in order to find it. Not only was it not convenient from a traffic flow, but there was a hill that hit it as well. So you really had to work at it. But those are we see our role as those are visitor services. One of our strategic endeavors is to elevate our partners. And certainly in a Welcome Center, you are showcasing, private businesses, federal lands, state lands, and all of the experiences that people can do when they're here visiting.
Any questions? Okay. Carry on.
Anything else, Kari, on the task force? So the next steps on this will be to have the RFP and then to proceed forward with the work. But we did want to have this time to share with you and bring this update to you. Not only were we required to do it, but we wanted to do it as well. And it made good sense to do it at this meeting. And so we'll keep you apprised of that. And then I'm sure you will you can hear from us in subsequent budgets for additional appropriations out of that reserve fund for one-time funding to continue with this kind of project. So hopefully the next time we're together, we'll have an update on where we are with all of it. I did just want to, if I may, Madam Chairman, as you're traveling out to the Southeast Center, you go south on 25, we're at exit 4. That's the High Plains Road exit. And there's a roundabout, and then you'll go back across 25. We're in the southeast quadrant of that intersection of I-25 and High Plains Road. When you come in to the Welcome Center, it's your first right. You can park, there's a parking lot, and then we'll just have you all convene in that lobby area that's that would be considered the 24-hour area. And so just we'll all convene there with you, and we'll give you a tour of the facility and a little bit of background on that site. And there's some really interesting historical elements to that particular piece of land that we didn't even know about until the land was gifted to the state of Wyoming, and then we learned some additional things about it. So we're excited to share it with you, and we're excited to welcome you out.
Okay, Does that conclude your?
That concludes
okay.
everything, Madam Chairman.
Any questions? Oh, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just, Director, just wondering how, and again, I don't expect, hard numbers, but are our numbers up for the most part for visitations throughout our state?
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Senator Schuler, yes, it has been a bit of a mixed bag this year, but on the aggregate, the answer is yes. We started off slowly, a little bit slower in June, and I think that really is a reflection of the past couple of years, where outdoor, go to the great outdoors, go to the wide open spaces were some of the only travel choices that Americans had in their travel decisions. And so, they wanted to go back to Europe. There's a huge outbound travel of Americans visiting Europe and other places this summer. I mean, I think you've all heard the horrific lines that are like 6 months to get your passport renewed. And so that's an indication of where the domestic traveler is going. We also have not fully recovered in international inbound. But I just looked at the tax distribution reports this morning off of the accommodations sector, which is the largest indicator of overnight visitation. And we were up substantially July and August of this fiscal year. The September report was down slightly, but we're averaging 7% in the first 3 months of this fiscal year over where we were a year ago. So that's good news. Thank goodness the federal government decided to not have a shutdown, because we still really do draw a lot of travelers in and out through the month of October. I think most of us who live here, we love to travel around Wyoming during this month. And for the same reasons that we love it, visitors love it too. We also, Kari and I just spent some time 2 days ago going through some hotel performance data. We get a monthly subscription on hotel performance, which is another strong indicator of overnight visitation. And all of the metrics, occupancy, average daily rate, revenue per available room, are all trending upwards over where they were a year ago. And so those indicators are strong. And our partners, pending whatever happens in November, we should have a strong winter season too. We're, if we get the snow that we need. But thank you for asking. It looks like things are continuing to be a nice, steady growth industry for the state of Wyoming.
Follow-up? Any other questions? Okay, I guess if you are completed, then we'll go to public comment. Did Mr. Sweeney come online, Heather? Okay. Any public comment? All right. So I think what we will do at this point is break for our lunch and tour. So it's maybe best if we carpool out to the visitor center. And then Office of Tourism is hosting our lunch. So we will just be out there. And how long does it take to get out there? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes? Oh, okay. Okay, so we will see you there. Thank you. I know. Note that Diane stayed on task. Probably due to Kari saying, "This is your script, Diane."